In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Good afternoon. It is now afternoon here in Los Angeles, evening in New York, and it is still morning in Australia. And for those in Australia watching us, I wish you all a blessed feast of our Holy Mother, St. Mary, because it's already Saturday there, the 22nd of August. Here in North America, it's still Friday, the 21st of August, and also probably in parts of Europe as well, and maybe in Egypt just after midnight, and in Africa. But today here in North America, it's still Friday, 21st of August. I wasn't able to do my daily podcast this morning that I have called Coffee with Nuggets of Wisdom. And as I promised you yesterday, that I would like to speak to you a little bit today about St. Archdeacon Habib Girgis. And in fact, today is his feast day, the 21st of August. And in fact, he fell asleep on the 21st of August, 1951. And he was canonized as a saint in June of 2013. So to me, this is a very special day, and I think for the whole Coptic Orthodox Church, as more and more people get to know more about this modern Coptic saint and the latest saint that has been canonized in the Coptic Orthodox Church. This is a huge topic, and as some of you may know, that I did the whole PhD on Habib Girgis that I completed in 2014 at Fordham University in New York, and consequently was able to actually publish a book that was published by SVS Press, Habib Girgis, Coptic Orthodox Educator and a Light in the Darkness, and I'll put details for those that are interested to purchase the book. It's available in paperback and available in hardback as well. Always hardback copies are a little bit more expensive because they cost a little bit more to produce or to publish, but obviously hardback books last longer. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, and I'll put details of the book in the notes for you. But usually when I ask people, what do you know about Habib Girgis? I usually get two answers. That he was the one who established Sunday schools, and he was the one who worked as the dean of the theological college or the theological seminary. Both correct answers. But in fact, there is so much more to know about this man. This is just a short podcast today, but we will have, I think we need several sessions to speak about him in more detail. And I know that Father Suriel Andarawas in Canada was willing to actually reverse roles with me and interview me on Coffee with Bishop Suriel. So we will arrange this very soon. If he's tuning in, then hopefully I'll be in touch with him, or he'll be in touch with me, and we'll arrange this, because there is just so much to learn from his life, from his incredible ministry. But Habib Girgis was born in 1876, and he fell asleep on August 21st, 1951. And in fact, he was born during a period of darkness in the life of the church, a very difficult period in the life of the church, actually, where there was a lack of education. There was no clergy or lay people that were educated in religious or theological education. I'm just giving you quick snippets here. It's, it will not do this man, this great saint, justice to just speak for 10 minutes. But just to hopefully make you more intrigued to know more about him. In all of Egypt, there was one preacher who was an eloquent preacher and was very well read, and that was Father Philotheus Ibrahim Baghdadi. And he would go around from church to church in Cairo, in Alexandria, all the way to Aswan, preaching and teaching. And when you read about this man, this priest, that the churches were overflowing, even people were standing around the church with the windows open, listening to him preach. And sometimes his sermons went on for 3 hours, and people were attentive, listening, thirsty and hungry to hear the word of God preached to them. And unfortunately, they couldn't find anyone. He was the only one, Father Philotheus Ibrahim Baghdadi, and he actually wrote a couple of books as well. But it was certainly a period of darkness. Before this, before Habib Girgis, born 1876, earlier that century, there was a great patriarch in our church, and that was Pope Kyrillos IV. And he is known as the father of reform. And the reason he was known as the father of reform is because he gave attention also to education. In fact, opened schools for boys and for girls for the first time in Egypt. And why he did this? For 2 reasons. The ruler of Egypt at the time was Muhammad Ali Pasha. And Muhammad Ali Pasha's main interest was to build a strong army to be able to control the whole region. And so he began to open up industrial schools to train men that were in the army, and even sent leaders overseas into Europe to study and to come back and open these schools. But unfortunately, he ignored the education of the Copts. And so when Pope Cyril IV saw this, he began to open Coptic schools for boys and for girls for the first time. But that was not the only reason why Pope Kyrillos IV opened those schools, but also because at that same time, missionaries had come from America and from Europe, both Protestant and Catholic, with a very high quality education system, and began to proselytize and began to open up schools. And so he feared for his people. In fact, there were 3 things at that time that were tearing away at the very thread of Coptic identity. First of all, was pressures from within the church. There was a tension going on after Pope Kyrillos IV. In fact, a little bit later during the early period of Habib Girgis with Pope Kyrillos V, a tension was happening between the Pope, the hierarchy of the church, and what was known as the Majlis el-Milli, or the Lay Community Council. And the Lay Community Council were lay people, lay Coptic elite that had been studying at these foreign schools and had got a very excellent education, and they were in control of the administration, finances of the church. And so a tension happened, and a clash happened between the Pope and between this lay community council that led, unfortunately, to the banishment of Pope Kyrillos V, who was actually the longest reigning patriarch in our history, just over 50 years, to Baramos Monastery in Skitis for less than 1 year. And it was a very dark, very difficult period in the life of the church. I deviated away from what I was speaking about. Pope Cyril IV opened these schools and also brought into Egypt the second printing press. The first printing press came into Egypt by the government. And the second printing press to come into Egypt from Europe, from Austria, was the one that Pope Kyrillos IV had brought in. And the reason why, and when this press arrived at Cairo train station, he was not in Cairo at the time, but he sent his clergy and deacons and told them to have a procession for the printing press from Cairo train station to the Patriarchate. Very strange thing for a patriarch to say. And he even said something stranger than that. He said that if he was there at the time, he would have danced in front of the printing press as David the prophet danced in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And Pope Cyril IV said this because he believed that this printing press was going to transform the lives of the Copts. Why? Coptic newspapers, magazines, newsletters would begin to be published, books about history, theology, sacraments, liturgy, hymnology, on many, many topics. And then his aim was to begin to educate the Copts to be able to read and write, because there was a lot of illiteracy back at that time, so that they can get deeper into their faith, so that the missionaries that had come into Egypt would not have a great influence on them. So I was saying three things that were tearing away the very thread of Coptic identity. One was the missionaries that were coming into Egypt, and their goal at the beginning was to preach or to evangelize and proselytize among the Muslims, and they failed dismally. And so they turned towards a Coptic church that was very weak at that time in the middle of the 19th century. But the Copts, their love for the saints and for their church, they were not that successful either in getting through to transform or proselytize the Copts to convert to Catholicism or to Protestantism. The other thing, as I mentioned, was this tension inside of the church itself. And the third one was pressures coming from the authorities in Egypt at the time, not giving full access and full freedom for the church to be able to do this work. So this was the milieu or the atmosphere that Habib Girgis was born into in 1876. And Pope Shenouda III of blessed memory, and I mentioned this on page 13 of the book, says this about Habib Girgis. He says, "Our teacher, Archdeacon Habib Girgis, pioneer of religious education in our generation, started his life in an age that was almost void of religious education and knowledge. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, as the book of Genesis describes. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light, and the light was Habib Girgis." These are the words of Pope Shenouda III of blessed memory that he speaks about Saint Archdeacon Habib Girgis. And the reason why Pope Shenouda III says this is because this light was the light of education that Habib Girgis had brought back into the church that was missing for so many years. As I mentioned, he was born 1876, fell asleep on the 21st of August 1951. His father's name was Girgis Mankarios, and he died in 1882 when Habib Girgis was only 6 years old. And his mother Miriam had died in 1939. So Habib Girgis was brought up actually by his mother. She was not well. In fact, for most of her adult life, she was paralyzed. And she was a God-fearing lady and took him to the great Coptic school where he completed his primary and secondary education. And he had three siblings, Ghali and Kamel and Martha, two brothers and a sister. And one of his brothers actually died when he was young. But at that time, in 1893, when he had completed his secondary education, Pope Kyrillos V, the longest reigning patriarch in our church, when he saw the dismal state of the priests and the clergy and the lack of education, in November of 1893 decided to open a theological seminary in Cairo. And we must not confuse this theological seminary in Cairo with the catechetical school of Alexandria in the early centuries of Christianity. The catechetical school of Alexandria in the early centuries of Christianity, its purpose was to catechize the unbelievers, to prepare those that were joining the Christian faith and teaching them the Christian faith and the scriptures before their baptism. But what Pope Kyrillos V established in November of 1893 was a seminary, which was for the training of young men to become priests. This is a different purpose completely. And so Habib Girgis was actually one of the first 12 students to join the seminary in 1893. And they were teaching them so many different subjects on history, geography, mathematics, science. But the most important reason why the seminary was opened in the first place, to teach religion and theology, they could not find a theologian or a scholar to be able to teach the students. And the students became very upset and would complain to the dean at the time, who was Yusuf Mankarios. To no avail. Yusuf Mankarios wrote a couple of books also. And he would just sit with the students, open an old book, and just start reading to them. That's not teaching. And so Habib Girgis then decided to go into the library of the Patriarchate, which was a very rich library of manuscripts and books, and he began to read and to study and to research and to teach himself. In fact, they started to think, who can we bring in? And so they thought of Father Philotheos Ibrahim Baghdadi, this great preacher. So he came. He was senior age by then. And he began to teach the students. Halfway through the lecture, he actually collapsed and fell. And they carried him home. And within a few days, he had passed away. And so in the final year of Habib Girgis as a student at the seminary, they appointed him to teach the first-year students that were coming in. And a few months later, after he had completed his studies and graduated, he was appointed as a full-time lecturer at the theological college. There's so much to say about the theological college, but maybe on another occasion. But one of the main work that Habib Girgis did also was his work in the Sunday school movement. There was no Sunday school before this. There would be like blind cantors that would collect small groups of children in the yard of the church, and they would start giving them some rote learning of hymns or some verses, but that was about it. But Habib Girgis, after the decree of the Synod and another decree from Pope Kyrillos V, near the turn of the 20th century, he took this to heart and he began to think, how could he begin planning something to educate young people? And he began to put a plan together, first at St Mary's Church in Fagala, which is a suburb of Cairo, very well-known church. And he would begin writing a very simple catechism, Q&A, question and answer. Who is Jesus Christ? For example, he is the second person of the Trinity. Who is St. Mary? She is the Theotokos, the Mother of God. And simple questions like this with answers, and he would teach this to the children. And then slowly he began to develop this curriculum, and it became more advanced. Not only this, but he also wrote 6 volumes or 6 books for the teachers themselves, how to teach the children with the educational methods that he got from Europe. So he would read, for example, books by Friedrich Froebel, who was a very well-known educational philosopher in Germany at the time, the one who established the kindergarten movement. And he would take from what Friedrich Froebel would say, and he would write some of this and make sure that it is within Coptic theology and understanding. And so 6 volumes for all different age groups. And he would tell the teachers what lessons are suitable for this age group, for example, or what activities are suitable that you can have for this age group, what type of questions, many different things. Very interesting. I have a couple of the copies of those manuals that he wrote for teachers. But he also was very interested in popular education because illiteracy rate was very high in Egypt at the time. So he started to think of different methods of how to teach using icons and the religious pictures, and he would import from Europe many beautiful, colorful religious pictures of all different stories throughout the Bible, and he would write a summary and a verse on the back of these that he would print, and many of these would be distributed to the children all throughout Egypt and Sudan, and also to Ethiopia. In fact, millions sometimes of these religious pictures were being distributed, which was quite amazing. The other popular method of education, because a picture can tell us 1,000 words, as they say, so the teacher would teach the lesson, student would get a religious picture. When they go home, they'll remember the lesson from the images in the picture, and if they could read the summary on the back. And the other method that he used was through hymnology. He wrote several books, 3 books from memory, of hymns. And Western music had started to come into Egypt from these missionaries, but he wanted to preserve Coptic identity. And he did this he was a poet, so he would write the hymns, teaching the dogma of the church through these hymns, but adapting Coptic music. So music from the midnight praise, from the tasbihah, from the liturgy, from the hymns of the month of St. Mary, Kiyak, in December. And he would apply it to the words that he wrote, and he could use these words on different occasions, different seasons. So he was very intelligent in this way to teach the dogma to the children through the hymn books that he wrote. So those are interesting things to know about Habib Girgis and the work that he did in Sunday school. Another interesting thing that he did is that he didn't neglect the ministry to women and to females and to girls. And he specifically speaks about this in several areas, or several of his writings, of how there needs to be a ministry specific to girls, and that it should be women to take care of this ministry. But he also gave attention to villages as well. So in the villages was a very difficult situation, in fact, because there was no churches in the villages. There were no priests going to the remote villages. The situation was difficult because even Christian families sometimes did not even know they were Christian. They were not baptizing their children. And sometimes mixed families were living together, and you can imagine different customs, difficult things that may have taken place. And illiteracy rate was huge. And he wrote a booklet called Visitation to the Villages, a very interesting booklet, but I don't have time to go deeply into that, but you can read more about it in this book, and the methods that he used to try to advance the level of literacy, and how he utilized his Sunday school teachers during the summer months to go into these villages and to encourage the priests to take the Holy Altar Board and to go and pray liturgies for these families. Very, very interesting stories. Despite all of this, he also went through a lot of struggle, and he went through many tribulations, not just financially. Financially was only part of it, but he was resisted in his ministry immensely. But he fought very hard in a very spiritual way, and he was resilient, and he would never give up. He would never give up, no matter how difficult the situation was. Yes, he would have felt despondency, I'm sure, at times, but I think the grace of God was with him, and he was able to continue. And I want to read something in a letter that he had written to the Lay Community Council, responding to a vicious attack by a monk called Father Suriel Baramosi, who was a monk at the Baramos Monastery, and then later was appointed by Pope Kyrillos V to look after, as the Kanesi, or the one who was looking after the rituals and the rites in that church. And he was very jealous of Habib Girgis, as he considered him as a lay person, even though he was an archdeacon and, hold a priestly rank. But he was jealous that how can so-called this lay person be the dean of the seminary, and I, who was a monk and a priest, I should be in this role. Even though he didn't say it specifically, but you can feel the underlining tone from two vicious letters attacking Habib Girgis and accusing him of embezzling funds and money and teaching students useless languages like Greek and Hebrew, not understanding the importance of those two languages in studying the Old and the New Testament, for example. But this is, I have more information on this monk that just came to light this week, but maybe in a new chapter, in a new book, I might write about this. But this is what Habib Girgis, part of his response. He says, despite efforts that sapped my health and crushed my strength, I did not surrender for one day to anyone who resisted or envied me. This is a great grace that I do not deserve, as one cannot be envious or resistant except the one who does not have grace. Stones are thrown only at the trees that are filled with fruits, and birds peck only at ripe fruits. And certainly Habib Girgis was full of these ripe fruits in his ministry. I thank God Almighty that through His grace despair never penetrated my soul for even one day, but in fact I constantly smile at the resistances. I have forgiven and will continue to forgive. From the depth of my heart, everyone who desires to be my enemy in vain, knowing that it is inevitable that obstacles will come along the path of those who desire to serve God and people. It is inevitable that there is no honey without the bee sting, and he who abandons positive work for the sake of the murmurings of people resembles the horse that bolts when it sees its own shadow. Gold does not lose its value if it is rejected by animals, and the sun is not blemished if you cannot see it one day. It is imperative that we do not fail in doing good, for we shall reap the harvest in due time if we do not weary. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. A verse from Romans 12:21. Very powerful words. And he says many, many other powerful words that I quote in the book. But here is a lesson for all of us, especially those in ministry, that sometimes we are met with resistance. And sometimes we go through very dark days. But we can be inspired by the example that Habib Girgis gives us here. That if we are walking in the light, that if we are doing the work of God with all faithfulness, then forget about the negativities. Move on. If there is positive criticism, learn from it, but move on to continue doing the work of God. And Pope Shenouda III would say, instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle. See what good, positive work that you can do, and be inspired by this example of Habib Girgis today. And he would say also about education, he says, education is the first need for the community after bread. And one of his battle cries was that no young person or no man should be ordained to the priesthood without first completing a theological qualification, a formal theological qualification. Unfortunately, the church has still not learned this lesson till today. And many, many of our priests are ordained without having a proper theological education. And I think that's to our detriment. I am not belittling any of our clergy. I respect all of them. But I think that theological education is important. And Habib Girgis would always say this. Habib Girgis would always say that a doctor cannot operate as a doctor without having a medical degree. An engineer cannot work in the engineering field without first completing a proper qualification. The same for a dentist, the same for a teacher, and so on. And then he says, then what about this most important role of caring for people's eternity and their salvation? How can our priests not have the equipment and the proper qualifications to be equipped for this ministry? Yes, things are slowly changing, and now we have many theological colleges that are beginning to be accredited or have proper accreditation. And one of them is St Athanasius Theological College in Melbourne, where it is now being accredited all the way to PhD level. And by the grace of God, I worked very hard in this, and I really believed in this from, the inspiration of Habib Girgis, and I was able, with all of the faculty and staff, to be able to achieve this. And this is something I'm very proud of. Here also in California, under His Eminence Metropolitan Serapion and His Grace Bishop Carolus in Acts, St. Athanasius and St. Cyril Theological Seminary are in the process of seeking that accreditation, and have many great scholars working with them, teaching with them. Another fine institution in Sydney also, under Bishop Daniel, the Theological College there is also progressing and having accreditation there as well, and in several other areas. Egypt still has not got any institution that is accredited formally, but we hope that His Holiness Pope Tawadros II, who is deeply believes in the importance of raising the level of theological education in the church, and had a conference about this and many meetings. I'm sure that a great theological college in Cairo will be established, and now His Holiness has also established a wonderful academic library at St. Bishoy Monastery in the Logos Center. I haven't had the chance to enter and to see it yet, but I look forward in the near future. Incredible work, and I congratulate His Holiness on this. And we hope to hear more and more success of the importance of theological education in the Coptic Orthodox Church. I recommend this book to you, not because I wrote it, but it has a lot of fascinating information that is being mentioned for the first time. The good news I also have for you today is that this book has been translated. It was translated by Father Gergesil Antoni, and I'm grateful to him for translating this book. And it is currently being typeset, and hopefully later this year it will be available in Egypt in Arabic for the first time, and will be available for anyone, Arabic readers that are interested to read the book in Arabic and more about my research. But I wanted to share this information with you today. May the prayers and intercessions of this great modern saint of ours, Habib Girgis, be with all of you, and glory be to God forever. Amen.